The morning sun was gently creeping through the thin curtains of my bedroom when I woke up, casting a soft golden glow across the room. At 68, I was no stranger to the familiar aches in my joints. It wasn't my alarm clock that woke me, but the reminder of my age. The sharp pain in my knees, the stiffness in my back, these were my morning companions. I'd become used to it though, this quiet existence. Used to waking up alone in a big, empty house that once echoed with life, but now only held silence. A silence that seemed to grow louder with each passing day. I sighed, stretching my stiff body as I slowly got out of bed. I moved toward the window, my bare feet touching the cool wooden floor, each step reminding me of how the years were adding up. My house sat on a quiet street in Buchanan, a small town where everyone knew each other, but where most people were content to mind their own business. I pushed the curtains aside and looked out over my garden, a little patch of peace in a world that had grown increasingly distant. The roses in my garden had started blooming, their bright colors a welcome sight. At least the roses never disappointed. And unlike my son, Noor, even as I thought his name, I felt a confusing mix of love and bitterness, a feeling I couldn't quite explain. Noor, my only child, about to turn 44, was someone I had lived for, worked tirelessly for, and saved every extra dollar for. He had been the center of my world, but now, he barely found the time to call me once a month. I couldn't remember the last time he'd asked, "How did you sleep, Mum?" The love was still there, but the connection was strained, fraying more. With every passing year, I turned and walked toward the kitchen, the morning rituals coming automatically. I set the kettle on the stove, my movements slow and deliberate, like clockwork. Years of routine had turned me into someone who valued order. It was a trait I'd carried through my 35 years as the chief accountant at Buchanan Industries. Precision and structure had been my life, and they had served me well. After I retired 12 years ago, I decided to put my skills to use in a different way. Investing. At the time, most people thought I was crazy. "Irma, at your age, it's time to relax, not take risks," my dear friend Rose had said. But I didn't listen. Numbers had always been my language. I understood their patterns, their rhythm, and I knew how to make them work for me. What started with a modest sum of $300,000 from retirement savings and insurance money from Alan's death had turned into something unimaginable. $13 million. It was a figure I still couldn't say aloud without feeling lightheaded. I hadn't told anyone about my newfound wealth. Even Rose only knew that I was comfortably well off, but not how much. In a town like Buchanan, rumors would spread like wildfire if they knew Irma Abbott, the widow, had become a millionaire. And Noel, if he knew, would probably treat me like I was someone else. The thought made me uneasy, but it was the truth. I sipped my tea and glanced at the calendar on the fridge. Noel's birthday was just 5 days away. 44. How quickly the years had passed. It felt like only yesterday that I was holding his tiny body in my arms, looking up at Alan, who stood beside me, a proud but bewildered expression on his face. Alan had died when Noor was only 10, sudden and without warning. A heart attack, merciless, fast. In an instant, I was left alone with a young son and a mountain of bills. The mortgage we had just taken out for this house, hoping to raise at least 3 children here, was now mine to bear alone. Those early years were a blur of endless workdays, sleepless nights, and the constant fear of failure. But I did whatever I could to give Noel a good life. I worked any job I could get my hands on to ensure he had what he needed, never wanting him to feel the absence of his father or our modest means. But somewhere along the way, I made a mistake. I was so afraid that Noor would feel deprived, so determined to give him the things I couldn't. that I started to spoil him. The best toys, the finest clothes, the summer camps for wealthy children. Whatever I could afford, I gave him. I cut my own expenses to the bone. I didn't go to the hairdresser, shopped at discount stores, and drove the old Ford Alan had left behind. Noel grew used to it, used to getting whatever he wanted. First, it was innocent childhood whims. Then, it became teenage entitlement. And finally, adult selfishness. I could see it now, how the gap between us had widened. I sighed and put the empty cup in the sink. What was the point of looking back now? You can't change the past. What mattered was the future. And for the past few months, that's what I have been focused on. I pulled a thick envelope from my desk drawer and looked at the check inside. $13 million. My entire fortune accumulated over the years. I'd thought about this decision for a long time, weighing the options, considering all the possibilities. And now, I had made up my mind. It was time to let go, time to give it all to Noel while I was still alive, to see how he would use it. But how to give it to him? That was the question. Yesterday, I went upstairs to my office and opened the safe hidden behind a painting of a mountain lake. Inside was a book that Noel had adored as a child, Thomas the Brave Knight. We had read it together every night for years, and he knew every word by heart. It was a first edition from 1958, something I had tracked down for months through a specialized auction. It wasn't cheap, but I had the money, and I wanted this gift to be special. I wanted it to remind him of a time when we were close, when he was still my little boy. I placed the check carefully inside the book and ran my fingers over the worn leather cover. Just then, the phone rang. "Irma, are you home?" Rose's familiar voice came through the receiver. "Yes, of course. Come in. I've just made some tea," I said. As I headed down the stairs. 10 minutes later, we were sitting in my small conservatory, sipping tea and watching the hydrangeas outside the window. Rose had been my closest friend in Buchanan for years. We had met 30 years ago when she taught at the local school, where Noel had attended. Rose had retired and devoted herself to gardening, winning local competitions. But one thing had remained constant: our friendship. "So, have you really made up your mind?" Rose asked, setting her cup aside. "You're giving all the money to Noel?" I nodded. "Yes, I've made up my mind. The book is wrapped, the check is enclosed. I'll give it to him at his birthday party." Rose frowned, a deep wrinkle appearing between her eyebrows. "Irma, darling, I don't mean to be rude, but are you sure Noel would appreciate it? I mean, not the money, but the book." I smiled weakly. I knew Rose was concerned. She had seen how Noel had changed over the years, how distant he had become. "Honestly, I'm not sure," I said. "But I want to believe that somewhere inside him, he's still the boy who loved that fairy tale." Rose sighed. "I'm just worried about you. 13 million is a huge amount of money. What if he just squanders it, or worse? What if his wife gets her hands on it?" At the mention of Vanity, my sister-in-law, I wrinkled my nose. Our relationship could best be described as polite but cold on the best of days, and downright strained on the worst. Vanity had a gift for spending money as quickly as it came. A fitness instructor with lofty ambitions, she had turned Noel into someone even more insufferable than before they met. "What about Winslow?" Rose continued. "Will your granddaughter even get anything?" I smiled at the thought of Winslow, my 19-year-old granddaughter. She was the one bright spot in Noel's family, humble, thoughtful, and passionate about literature. "I've set aside some money for her education," I said. "It will go directly to the college she's attending. As for Noel, I'm sure he'll take care of her." Rose didn't look convinced. And when do you plan to move into that nursing home? She asked, changing the subject. Quiet Gardens isn't just a nursing home, Rose. It's a senior independent living community. I corrected her. And I applied for next month. I'll start packing after Noel's birthday. I still don't like it. Rose frowned. You're giving your ungrateful son your entire fortune, and you're going off to this. What's it called, community? Why not just enjoy the money yourself? Travel. See the world. I stood up and walked to the window, gazing at the garden, and the house that had been my refuge for so many years. Because money was never the goal for me. Rose, I said, my voice quiet but firm. It was always a means to secure a future for Noor. Now that I have so much of it, it's weighing me down. I just want to be free of them. Rose came over and put her hand on my shoulder. I understand, darling. I just hope you don't regret your decision. I placed my hand over hers. I won't, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. After all, what else is money for, if not to help the ones you love? After Rose left, I spent the rest of the afternoon wrapping the book and tying it with a perfect bow. Every movement was slow, deliberate. It felt like I was performing a sacred ritual. In a way, I was. I was saying goodbye to the past, to the fortune I had accumulated, and to the hopes I once had for my son. That evening, I looked once more at the wrapped gift resting on the bedside table. The beautiful wrapping covered the time-worn book, and the book hid a check that could change Noor's life forever. I lay in bed, feeling strangely calm. No matter what happened at Noor's birthday party, I was ready to accept the consequences of my decision. After all, I had spent my life worrying about Noor's future. Now, it was time to take care of my own. No birthday party ever felt so important. At least that's what the saleswoman had said. The wrapped book lay on the table by the door, patiently waiting for its time. I took one last look at myself in the mirror, fixed my grey hair in a neat bundle, and took a deep breath. I'd had a strange feeling since this morning, a mixture of hope and anxiety. My life was going to change today. I knew it. But would it be for the better? I carefully took the gift and walked out of the house. My old Chevy was parked in the driveway, a faithful companion. For the past 15 years. Another thing I was going to have to part with after moving to Quiet Gardens. Null and Vanity's house was in the most prestigious part of Buchanan, the so-called North Hills. Huge mansions with immaculate lawns and 3 garages, where property value started at $1 million. Null bought his house 5 years ago when his business, a chain of premium car washes, began to make a serious profit. I was ashamed to admit, even to myself, but I always felt uncomfortable coming to visit, like I wasn't good enough for Theplis. As I pulled up to my son's house, I saw a string of expensive cars lined up along the driveway. Mercedes, BMWs, Lexuses, a car show of wealthy Buchanan residents. My humble Chevy looked like a poor relative at a royal ball. I parked a little farther away so as not to disturb the other guests and walked slowly toward the house, clutching the gift tightly to my chest. The sounds of music and laughter came from the open windows, growing louder with each step I took. I was met on the doorstep by Vanity, a slender blonde with flawless makeup and a smile that never reached her eyes. Today, she was wearing a tighted dress that must have cost more than I spent on clothes in an entire year. "Irma," she exclaimed with phlegmadentism, "how nice of you to be able to come, as if I could miss my own son's birthday." "Hello, Vanity," I replied, trying to smile. "You look lovely." "Oh, it's an old dress." She waved her hand, though we both knew it was new and expensive. "Come on in. Everyone's here. No will be happy to see you." I doubted the last statement, but I obediently followed her into their spacious living room filled with people. Most of them I was seeing for the first time. Noel's business associates, Vanity's friends from the health club, neighbors from the North Hills. There were few familiar faces. I only noticed Winslow, my granddaughter, chatting with some young man in the corner of the room. When she saw me, Winslow apologized to her conversation partner and hurried over to meet me. Her sincere smile was like a breath of fresh air amidst the strained social grimaces of those around her. "Grandma," she hugged me, careful not to wrinkle her light summer dress. "I'm so glad you came. How could I not come to your father's birthday party?" I smiled, looking at her lovingly. "You look beautiful, dear. How are things going at college?" "It's going great." Winslow's eyes lit up. "I just got a perfect score on my English literature essay. Professor Higgins said I have the potential to be a Winslow," came Vanity's voice. "Help me with the canopes. Please." My granddaughter sighed. "I'm sorry, grandmother. Duty calls." "Well, talk later, okay?" She hurried off at her mother's call, and I was left alone in the middle of the room, feeling out of place and awkward. I looked around for Noel, but he was nowhere to be seen. Deciding that he was probably meeting other guests, I quietly made my way to the drinks table and grabbed a glass of white wine. The party had been organized with typical Vanity fanfare. Waiters in white gloves were serving trays of gourmet, or the bar was stocked with bottles of expensive alcohol, and a three-tiered cake with gold edible decorations stood in the center of the living room. In the backyard, visible through the panoramic windows, was a huge grill where a chef in a high hat was grilling steaks. I walked over to one of large windows, watching the commotion in the courtyard. And then I saw Noel. He was standing among a group of men, laughing loudly and waving a glass of whiskey. My son looked just like his father, at the same age, tall, broad-shouldered, with a distinctive dimple in his chin. Only his eyes were mine, grey with a slight tinge of green at the edges of the iris. He wore an expensive suit, obviously tailored, and new cufflinks that gleamed in the sun. His hair, already touched with grey at the temples, was styled with perfect carelessness. Noel was always careful about his appearance, another trait he'd inherited from his father. I didn't dare go out into the courtyard and interrupt conversation. Instead, I stepped away from the window and sat on the edge of the couch, still holding the gift in my lap. Marilyn Porter, the wife of the city judge and one of the few women my age at the party, immediately sank down beside me. "Irma dear, how are you?" she asked with genuine warmth in her voice. "It's been so long since we've seen each other." "I'm fine, Marilyn," I replied, delighted to see a familiar face. "How are your grandchildren?" We fell into a pleasant conversation about children and grandchildren, gardening, and the new cafe that had opened in downtown Buchanan. For a short time, I almost forgot my nervousness and anxious anticipation. But my relative calm was shattered when Vanity clapped her hands loudly, attracting the attention of the guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced with a radiant smile, "it's time for the special part of our evening, the gift-giving." The guests applauded, and I felt my heart quicken. The moment of truth was approaching. Noel took center stage in the living room, sitting in a large leather chair like a king on a throne. Vanity stood beside him, directing the waiters where to place the gifts, right at her husband's feet, like offerings. One by one, the guests approached Noel, presenting their gifts and receiving a practiced smile and handshake in return. The gifts were appropriate to the setting. Expensive, exclusive, designed to impress. A golf set from a business partner, a case of collectible whiskey from a neighbor, a cashmere sweater from Aunt Vanity. I watched this ceremony with growing unease. My modestly wrapped gift seemed increasingly out of place among the shiny boxes and bags of famous brands. And now, Vanity announced as the line of guests drew to a close. it's time for my gift." She made a sign to the waiter, who immediately came with a small velvet box on a silver tray. Vanity took the box and handed it to Noelle with a solemn look. "Happy birthday, darling," she said, kissing him on the cheek. Noelle opened the box and whistled in surprise. Inside was a wristwatch. I could see the glitter of gold and diamonds even from where I was sitting. "Packhype," he exclaimed, pulling out the watch and showing it to his guests. "Just what I wanted." "Thank you, my dear," the guest murmured in delight, and Vanity blossomed with pride. I heard her whisper to a friend standing nearby. "Cost a fortune, but he deserves only the best." And then I realized it was my turn. All the other gifts had already been given. I slowly rose from the couch, clutching my modest package tightly. The living room suddenly seemed huge, and the road to Noelle seemed endless. "Oh, Mom." Noel noticed me as I approached. His voice didn't have the warmth of the other guests. "Did you bring a present too?" I nodded, not trusting my voice, and handed him the package. No took it with slight confusion, clearly surprised by the lightweight. "What is this?" he asked, starting to unfold the paper. "Just something special," I mumbled. "I hope you like it." Noelle ripped off the wrapping and stared at the tattered leather-bound book. His face, which had just brightened with pleasure, stretched. "A book?" he asked, as if I'd handed him a dead rat. "You gave me a book for 44 years. I tried to explain. "It's a first edition of Thomas the Brave Knight. You loved that story so much as a child, remember? We read it every night, and you always a children's book." Noelle interrupted me. His voice was getting louder, and his face was getting redder. "Really, Mom? Every honor gives normal adult gifts, and you brought a shabby children's book." There was an awkward silence in the room. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. Surprised, embarrassed, pitying. "I thought it would be nice for you to remember." I started, but Noelle wouldn't let me finish. "Remember what?" "How you saved money on everything, even normal gifts." He stood up abruptly, holding the book with 2 fingers as if it were contagious. 44 years, Mom. I'm a successful businessman. I have my own company, a house, a family, and you give me this crap." I took a step back, shocked by his reaction. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Vanity cover her mouth with her hand, but it was not shock in her eyes, but gloating satisfaction. "Noelle, please," it whispered. "Just open the book." But he wasn't listening. His face was contorted with anger. The kind of pure, uncontrollable anger I'd seen in him as a child when he didn't get what he wanted. "You know what?" He lifted their book higher, showing it off to all the guests. "This is what I think of your gift." And with those words, he threw the book to the floor with force. The old binding clattered against the parquet, and the book opened, falling with the spine upwards. I stared in horror, unable to move or say anything. But Nell didn't stop there. He stepped closer to me, towering over my small figure, and said so loudly that even the waiters in the kitchen must have heard, "You are a disgrace to our family. Always have been and always will be." The living room fell into dead silence. I stood there paralyzed with shock and humiliation, feeling hot tears come to my eyes. In that moment, I was grateful for my years as an accountant. They had taught me to keep my face even in the most stressful situations. "I apologize," I said quietly, addressing everyone and no one in particular. "I have to go." I turned and walked toward the exit, my back feeling the stares of everyone present. No one stopped me. No one said a word. It wasn't until I was at the door that I heard Winslow's quiet voice say, "Grandma, wait." But I couldn't stop, not now. I walked out of the house without even turning around and quickly headed to my car. Only once I was inside it, I let myself burst into tears, cradling my face in my hands. Through the tear-fogged windshield, I watched Thepity continue as the guests slowly made their way out to the backyard where the next part of the festivities would begin. The book, my precious book with the check inside, was left lying on the living room floor, forgotten and abandoned by everyone. I started the car and slowly pulled into the driveway, feeling something inside me irrevocably broken. All my life, I'd lived for my son, given him everything I could. And this is how he repaid me. Public humiliation, cruel words, contempt. As it drove up to my house, I knew my plans had changed. I would not be going to quiet gardens. I would not quietly live out my life thinking about my ungrateful son. The $13 million that should have been his inheritance would now be my ticket to a new life, a life without Noel. And the book, well, the book was left there, thrown on the floor, just like my motherly love, trampled and devalued. I spent a sleepless night tossing and turning in bed, replaying the events of my birthday. No's words echoed in my mind. "You are a disgrace to our family." How could he say that? Me who devoted my whole life to him, denying myself everything so Faith wouldn't need anything. I who single-handedly raised him after Alan's death, working 2 jobs to pay for his education. Am I a disgrace? The morning brought clarity of thought, but it didn't ease the pain. I rose with the first rays of sunlight, feeling each of my years and aching joints. Breakfast didn't stick in my throat, so I limited myself to a cup of strong tea, sitting by the window and watching my quiet newbornhood wake up. My book, my check. Now they were lying somewhere in Noel's house, forgotten and unneeded. $13 million. A sum that could have changed this life. Provided a trouble-free old age for me. Given Winslow a great education. And he'd literally thrown it all on the floor, not even bothering to look inside. At 8 o'clock, I dialed the number of Simon Blackwell, my attorney, who had helped me with investments and legal matters for the past 15 years. One of the few people who knew about my present financial situation. "Simon, I need to see you urgently," I said as soon as he answered. "It's regarding my will in a certain check." "Of course, Mrs. Abbott," he replied with his characteristic restraint. "I have a window at 10:30. Will that suit you?" "Absolutely. I'll be in your office." I began to pack methodically and carefully, as I had done everything in my life. First, I pulled out all the documents relating to my assets, bank statements, investment portfolios, house deeds. Then, I picked out a strict suit, grey with a faint lavender stripe. Alan always said that this suit made me look like a woman who was best not to be trifled with. Before I left, I stopped at the hallway mirror. Who was that woman looking back? At me in their reflection? Wrinkles around her eyes and mouth, grey hair, a tired look. And yet there was a fire in those eyes now that hadn't been there yesterday. Determination. I will no longer be the victim of my own son's ingratitude. No more. Simon's office was in downtown Buchanan, a modern glass and concrete building in stark contrast to the Victorian architecture prevalent in the city. The receptionist, a young woman with a friendly smile, ushered me directly into the lawyer's office. Simon Blackwell was the epitome of what a successful lawyer should look like. An impeccably dressed man in his 50s with a neatly trimmed beard, and graying hair and attentive brown eyes behind expensive thin-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Abbott." He stood up to shake my hand. "It's good to see you, though I'm concerned about your urgent visit. Is everything all right?" I sank into the leather chair across from his desk and shook my head. "No, Simon. I made a mistake and I want to fix it before it's too late." I spent the next hour telling him about my plan to give Noel all the money, about the book with the enclosed check, about the disastrous birthday party. Simon listened attentively, occasionally making notes in his notebook, but not interrupting. So, he summarized when I was done. You want to cancel the check and change your will. Is that correct? Yes, I nodded. The check should be cancelled immediately. As for the will, I have other plans for my money. May I ask what they are? I took a deep breath. I want to set up an Alan Abbott Charitable Foundation, a foundation that will support single parents, help them with their children's education, provide legal and financial support. Simon's eyes widened slightly in surprise. It's a very noble idea, Mrs. Abbott. But are you sure you want to hand over all your funds? 13 million is a considerable sum. Not all of it, I clarified. I want to leave 500,000 for Winslow, my granddaughter, for her education and her future. That money should be in a trust available only to her when she turns 25. I want to leave enough for me to live comfortably myself. I've changed my mind about moving into a nursing home. Simon nodded and made a few more notes. We can arrange everything exactly as you want it. As for the check, I'll contact the bank immediately and initiate the withdrawal procedure. It will take some time, but given the amount and circumstances, they will take their request seriously. How quickly will it be ready? I asked. Revoking the check is a matter of days. As for setting up the fund and changing the will, it'll take longer. Maybe a couple weeks to get everything set up properly. Okay, I nodded. The sooner the better. I want to put this matter to bed once and for all. When all the necessary papers were signed and instructions were given, I felt strangely relieved. It was as if the heavy weight I'd carried on my shoulders. The years began to slip away. You know, Mrs. Abbott, Simon said. Ash walked me to the door. In the 15 years we've been working together, this is the first time I've seen you so determined. I smiled weakly. Sometimes, Simon, we need a good punch to wake up and see the truth. When I got home, I found Winslow on the porch. She was sitting on the steps with her arms wrapped around her knees like a little girl, not a 19-year-old college student. When she saw me, she jumped up. Grandma, I've been calling you all morning. I just realized I left my phone at home. I'm sorry, dear. I had an important meeting. We entered the house and I went straight into the kitchen to put the kettle on. Winslow followed me like a shadow. Grandmother, I feel so awful about yesterday, she began, sitting down at the kitchen table. The way Daddy treated you, it's unforgivable. It pulled out the cups white with small blue floral designs, a wedding present from Alan's parents. One of the few things I still have from that time. Not your fault, Winslow. Your father, always had a difficult temper. But to humiliate you in front of all the guests because of a gift. There was genuine outrage in my granddaughter's voice. I almost fell to the ground in shame. And Mum, she didn't even try to stop him. Just stood there smirking. I put a cup of tea in front of her and sat down across from her. What happened after I left? Winslow cuped her hands around the cuppas, if trying to keep warm, even though it was a hot day. First, there was an awkward pause. Then Dad said something like, I apologize for the incident and motioned for everyone to go out into the courtyard where the tables had already been set. The party continued as if nothing had happened. And the book? I asked, trying to keep my voice as neutral as possible. Oh. Winslow looked a little embarrassed. When everyone was out, I picked it up off the floor. I wanted to give it back. To you. But you'd already left. It's at our house now, along with the other gifts. Where exactly? I couldn't help my curiosity. In the garage, my granddaughter sighed. Daddy said to put all the presents there to sort them out later. But to be honest, he almost never takes their presents apart. Usually, Mom just gives them to charity or sells them online after a few weeks. I felt something inside me clench. Imagine my precious gift My favorite book with a check for $13 million lying in a pile of junk in the garage. Good thing I decided to cancel the check. Winslow, I covered her hand with mine. I want you to know that whatever happened between me and your father has no bearing on my feelings for you. You are my treasure and I will always love you. The girl's eyes filled with tears. You know, she said quietly, sometimes I don't understand how I could have been born into such a family. Dad's obsessed with money and status. Mum's obsessed with brands and looks, and me, I just want to read books and maybe someday write my own. I smiled, feeling a rush of tenderness for this young creature who, by some miracle, retained purity of soul despite her surroundings. You'll do fine, dear. I'm sure of it. We talked for another hour or so about her studies, about the book she had been reading lately, about her dreams. Not once did we mention Noel or vanity or yesterday's incident. It was as if they had tacitly agreed not to cloud our conversation with these topics. As Winslow was about to leave, I suddenly realized there was something I had to tell her. Winslow, I want you to know one more thing. I began as I helped her into her light jacket. I've changed my will. Most of my money will go to a charity, but I've set up a trust for you. When you turn 25, you'll have access to it. It'll be enough for your education and to start your own life without depending on your parents. Her eyes widened in surprise. Grandma, what are you talking about? What money? I thought you were only living on your pension. I smiled. Let's just say your old grandmother turned out to be a pretty good investor. You'll find out the details later. Just know that I've taken care of your future. Winslow hugged me so tightly that for a moment I had trouble breathing. You're the best grandma, the best in the world. After my granddaughter left, I sat in the silence of the living room for a long time, pondering the vicissitudes of fate. My son, for whom I lived and worked, turned out to be an ungrateful, selfish man, and his daughter, to whom I could not devote as much time as I would have liked, grew up to be a sensitive and understanding person. Life is full of irony. In the evening, I received a letter from Simon. He had already started the procedure of withdrawing the check and sent the necessary documents to the bank. In a few days, he wrote, everything would be official and the check would be void. I looked at the computer screen, reading and rereading the letter, and felt strangely calm. For the first time in years, I wasn't acting in Noah's interest, but in my own, and the feeling was liberating. The next day, I met with Simon, again to discuss the details of setting up a charitable foundation. We decided to call it the Alan Abbott Family Support Fund, in honor of my late husband, who always believed in helping those in need. It will be a great way to honor his memory, Simon said, as he looked over the preliminary documents, and to help people who were in a situation similar to yours after his death. I nodded, remembering Alan, his kindness, his laugh, his faith in people. He'd always said that true wealth wasn't measured in money, but in good deeds. I wonder what he would say about our son now. By the end of the week, all the paperwork for the check bounce was completed and sent. Simon assured me that the procedure was on track, and the check would soon be officially cancelled. The documents for the foundation were almost ready too. Only a few formalities remained. I began to plan my new life. Instead of moving to quiet gardens, I decided to travel to visit the places I had always dreamed of. Paris, Rome, Barcelona, Tokyo. The list grew by the day, as did my excitement for the adventure ahead. On Saturday morning, exactly 1 week after me, unfortunate birthday, I received an official notice from the bank. A check for $13 million written in the name of Noel Abbott was cancelled and could no longer be cashed. The same day, a letter from Simon arrived. All the paperwork for the charitable foundation was ready and waiting for my signature. I stood at the window, both notices in my hands, and looked out at my garden where the roses were blooming brightly. On this sunny day, a strange feeling took over me. A mixture of sadness and relief, regret and hope. I thought about how things might have turned out differently if Null had just opened the book. If he had valued more than material things, if had remained the boy who had once listened with rapt attention to stories about the brave knight Thomas. But there was no changing the past. You can only move forward. And that's what I was going to do. No regrets, no looking back. There was a new chapter of life ahead of me. A chapter one would write on my own without regard for my ungrateful son. 3 weeks flew by. I was fully immersed in planning my future, booking plane tickets to Paris, studying guidebooks on European cities, looking for cozy hotels overlooking famous landmarks. Each day brought new ideas and opportunities. For the first time in many years, I felt truly free. The documents for the creation of a charitable foundation were signed and sent to the appropriate authorities. Simon assured me that within a month, the foundation would be officially registered, and we could start its work. I had already drawn up a list of activities and programs I wanted to implement. Scholarships for children from single-parent families, legal support for single mothers, professional tutoring programs, all the things I had missed when I was alone with little Null in my arms after Alan's death. It tried not to think about my son, that sometimes memories broke through the wall I'd built, especially in the evenings when I sat in my chair by the fireplace with a cup of herbal tea. At those moments, my mind would wander back to that birthday, to the book I'd thrown on the floor, to the cruel words that still lingered in my heart. Noel hadn't tried to contact me since that night. Not a call, not a text, not even a formal apology. Through Winslow, it was as if I didn't exist in his life. My granddaughter visited me regularly, but she studiously avoided talking about her father, and I didn't insist. We both realized that some wounds were better left undisturbed. That morning, exactly 23 days after his unfortunate birthday, I was sitting on the veranda with the morning paper when the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, and I almost decided not to answer. But at the last moment, I did. Mrs. Abbott. It was Eamon's voice. "This is Derek Harrington from the Buchanan Daily. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your son's car wash chain." I froze, clutching the phone a little harder than necessary. "I'm sorry, but I don't know what you mean. I have nothing to do with my son's business." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry if I'm bothering you. It's just that. Rumor has it that the premium Clint chain is in serious financial trouble. Some outlets have already closed. We're doing a story and we thought you might." "I can't help you," I interrupted him, feeling my pulse quicken. "Have a good day." I hung up the phone and just sat there for a while, staring off into space. Null's business was in danger. How could this be? Not so long ago, he was bragging that his chain of car washes was the most successful in the county, that revenues were growing every month, that he was planning to open new outlets in neighboring towns. My thoughts were interrupted by a call from Rose. "Irma, did you hear the news?" She started without preamble. "About no. I already knew what about. Yes, they say his business is on the verge of bankruptcy. I drove by his main car wash in Oak Street this morning, and there's a sign that says closed for renovation. But everyone knows that's just an excuse." I sighed. In a small town like Buchanan, rumors spread at the speed of wildfire. "I just got a call from a reporter from the local paper," I admitted. "But I don't know anything. Noel hasn't spoken to me since the incident." "Oh, Irma." I could hear the sympathy in Rose's voice. "I know you don't want to worry about him after everything that's happened. But still, he's your son." I didn't say anything. Of course, for all the pain Noel had caused me, I couldn't quite drown out my maternal feelings. Somewhere deep inside me, I still had hope that he'd come to his senses, that we could rebuild our relationship. But I also knew I'd made the right choice in cancelling the check. Nell had to learn to live with his decisions and their consequences. That evening, I received an unexpected text from Winslow. "Grandma, can I stay with you for a couple days? It's difficult at home right now." Difficult. I immediately texted her that I would be happy to see her any time. 2 hours later, she was at my doorstep with a backpack full of books and eyes rimmed with tears. "What's wrong, dear?" I asked, hugging her. Winslow shook her head, clearly not wanting to talk right now. I didn't insist. I made her a hot chocolate, her favorite drink since childhood. And it wasn't until we were snuggled in the living room that she finally spoke. "Daddy has some serious business problems," she said quietly, looking into her cup. "Some kind of loaner. Can't pay off. The bank is threatening to repossess the house and the cars. He and Mom fight all the time. She blames him for everything. Screams that he's ruined their lives." I listened, feeling my heart clench. Not because of Noel. Was an adult, and he was responsible for his own financial decisions because of Winslow, who was caught up in this adult drama. "You can stay here as long as you need to," I said when she was done. "Your room is always ready for you." Winslow smiled weakly and kissed my cheek. She really did look exhausted, pale with dark circles under her eyes. No wonder she wanted to escape from a house filled with arguments and tension. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of an incoming message. It was Winslow again, though she was asleep in the next room. "Grandma, I'm sorry, but Dad just called. He found out you had me, and he's on his way here now. Says he found something important and wants to talk to you." It told him it was a bad idea, but he wouldn't listen. I barely had time to get dressed when I heard the sound of a car pulling up. I looked out the window and saw Noel's black Mercedes pulling up in front of my house. My son jumped out of the car, slamming the door so hard it looked like the windows were about to shatter. He was holding something in his hand, and I was surprised to recognize it as an old leather-bound book. Thomas the Brave Knight. Noah literally flew up the steps and started drumming on the door, not giving himself the trouble to ring the bell. I approached the door slowly, bracing myself for the inevitable confrontation. "Mum," he exclaimed as soon as I opened the door. "We need to talk." He looked awful, wrinkled, unshaven with a feverish glint in his eyes. There was no trace of his usual grooming and self-assurance. "Come in," I said calmly, stepping aside. Noel burst into the hallway, waving a book. "Do you know what was inside?" he exclaimed, wasting no time in greeting me. "Do you know what you put in that damn book?" "Of course I do," I replied, keeping an icy calm. "It put a check for $13 million in. There. My birthday present to you." No's face contorted with a mixture of shock, anger, and despair. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you just tell me what was inside? And you gave me the opportunity," I parried. "You didn't even bother to open the book. Instead, you threw it on the floor and called me a disgrace to the family in front of all guests." Noel ran his hand over his face, as if trying to erase the memories of that night. I didn't mean to," he stammered, clearly unable to find the words to justify it. "It doesn't matter. What matters now is this check. I found it last night when I was going through some stuff in the garage. Thought I'd sell some gifts to whatever. I saw the book, so I thought I'd see what you got that was so special. And I found a check." "Yeah." I nodded. "I found it 3 weeks after my birthday, when I decided to sell the gifts to solve my financial problems." Noel didn't seem to hear my sarcasm. "I called the bank right away, but they said the check bounced." He was almost shouting, "What does that mean? Why did you cancel it?" At that moment, Winslow appeared on the stairs, attracted by the loud voices. She looked frightened, shifting her gaze from her father to me and back again. I cancelled it because you showed you didn't appreciate me or my gifts, I replied, trying to keep my voice even. $13 million is all I've accumulated in my life. I wanted to give it to you because you are my son, and I thought you deserved that inheritance. But your behavior has proven otherwise. Mom, please. Noel suddenly changed tactics, his voice becoming pleading. You don't understand. I'm in a desperate situation. Creditors are on my heels. The bank is threatening to take the house. This money would have saved us. You understand perfectly well, I replied. But the decision has already been made. The money has been transferred to a charitable foundation named after your father. It will help single parents and their children like you and I were after Alan's death. Noel turned pale as if I'd slapped him. You gave $13 million to charity? He asked incredulously. My money, not yours. I corrected him. It was mine. I earned it. I invested it. I multiplied it. And I've decided what to do with it. Noel sank into the chair in the hallway, still clutching the book in his hands. He looked utterly crushed. You can't do this, he muttered. It's not fair. Unfair? I felt the anger I'd been holding back all these years rising in me. It wasn't fair to raise you alone, working 2 jobs so you could go to private school. It wasn't fair to deny yourself everything so you could have the best toys, the best clothes, the best opportunities. It wasn't fair to put my whole soul into you and get nothing but arrogance and neglect in return. I stopped, realizing I was almost screaming. I took a deep breath and continued in a calmer voice. But you know what's really unfair? That you grew up thinking that the world owed you everything without giving you anything in return. That you can humiliate your own mother and expect her to smile and give you everything she has. That's what's truly unfair, Noel. My son remained silent with his head down. Winslow quietly walked over and stood beside me, placing her hand on my shoulder. In silent support. What am I supposed to do now? Noel finally asked, and there was genuine despair in his voice. I'm going to lose everything. The business, the house, the cars. You'll have to deal with it on your own, I said firmly. Like I'd done after your father died. Number 13 million. No support. No hope of miraculous salvation. Just my own strength and my own mind. Noah looked up at me, his eyes a mixture of hurt and anger. Vanity was right, he said bitterly. You've always been a vindictive old woman. You're punishing me for one mistake, one bad day. No, Noel, I shook my head. I'm not punishing you. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own actions. It's called growing up, and it seems to be 30 years too late for you. Noel stood up, clenching his fists. You're going to regret this, he gritted through his teeth. When Vanity and Winslow and I are on the street, when we have nothing to eat, you'll regret it. Papa, Winslow exclaimed indignantly. How can you say that? But Noel was no longer listening. He threw the book on Thefler just as he had the day he was born and stormed out of the house, slamming the door loudly. Winslow and I stood in silence, broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Finally, my granddaughter bent down and picked up the book. Did you really put a check for 13 million in there? She asked quietly, gently smoothing the wrinkled pages. Yes, I nodded. Everything I had. I wanted to secure your family's future. Winslow shook her head, clearly trying to make sense of what she was hearing. And Dad didn't even open it. He didn't. I confirmed. He wasn't interested. It was just a book. We went into the kitchen where I started making breakfast, and Winslow sat at the table still holding the book. What's going to happen now? She asked. With Dad, with their house, with the business? I sighed, pulling eggs and milk out of the refrigerator. I don't know, honey. Your father is a grown man. He's going to have to deal with his own problems. And Mom's certainly not going to help. Winslow grinned bitterly. Yesterday, she was yelling that she'd file for divorce if he didn't find the money by the end of the month, that she didn't sign up for the life of a bankrupt. I shook my head. Typical vanity. When things are going well, she's there for him. But when problems arise, she's the first to jump ship. No, what's ironic? Winslow continued, leafing through the book. Dad got into financial trouble because he took out a huge loan to expand his business. He wanted to open 5 more car washes in neighboring towns. But he miscalculated costs and now he couldn't make the interest payments. She stopped at a page with an illustration of the brave Knight Thomas fighting a dragon. That book, had it really been his favorite as a child?